Local advocates and state line residents rallied to voice their concerns about the big, beautiful bill. WIFR reporter Bria Walters talks to local advocates who urged Congressman Darin LaHood to say no to the bill.
We pray, God, that you would give Congressman LaHood a heart for the poor.
Community advocates gathered at Congressman Darin LaHood's office to pray against what they call the big, bad legislation. They say if the bill is on the president's desk by July 4th, it will negatively impact communities everywhere.
LaHood has previously communicated that he plans to support this bill, and we are extremely disappointed by that. We're afraid of the consequences that will have for Rockfordians.
Live Free Executive Director Reverend Sierra Bates Chamberlain agrees, and she begs LaHood to make what she calls the humane decision.
And we call it their beautiful lie. And so it's so important that we're out here to let him know that he needs to not make a vote based on his party. He needs to make a vote based on his constituency.
In a statement to WIFR, LaHood says the narrative that House Republicans are cutting Medicaid and SNAP benefits for those who need them is absolutely false. For critical programs like Medicaid and SNAP to continue for generations to come, we must prioritize addressing the spending crisis in our country and eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in federal spending. But Chamberlain Bates says people all over Illinois are watching LaHood, and they will not back down in their fight against the bill, though time is running out.
We're going to be organizing in communities, and we're going to let people know who voted for a bill that will kill, steal, and destroy communities, and who voted to save lives.
In Rockford, Bria Walters, WIFR News.
Those in attendance urge members of the public to contact their representatives and demand a vote against the legislation.